What's going on, people? It is the Byron DFS show this week. We have no longer got John Daigle with us. He has been an awesome blessing and a wonderful trio compatriot that we've had on the show for the last little while, but he's off to bigger and better things on the NFL side of things. But we have got you covered over here still on the BetSperts DFS show. Myself and PJ Splits 101, aka Ron Klaas, alongside me over here. Ron, how are you doing on this fine Wednesday afternoon?
Yeah, we're coming down the stretch here. Seems like maybe a lot of folks aren't caring as much about the playoffs here, maybe as much as us for sure. Maybe a little bit of golf fatigue, but we're here ready to break it all down. I think it's a really interesting slate this week. There's just so many strategies with the pricing, and top 70 only. I think we can really explore a lot of those options today.
Absolutely. I think we'll get into the strategy here in a little bit, but first we got to mention your beautiful course preview article that you have over at betspurtsgolf.com. And you want to walk us through some of the key things you're looking for from this TPC Southwind this week.
Yeah, so not a super long course, pretty average in length. It's a course that, really when you look at the numbers, strokes gained, ball striking really important, especially approach. You have the third smallest greens on the tour at only 4,300 square feet on average. So, one of the big things for me and kind of looking at this week is guys who can separate themselves, really looking at elite approach play. If you look at previous years, like Will Zalatoris last year, just going back down the line, you see all these elite ball strikers who have won here. And so, that's going to be something really important to look at. You have a course that's kind of famous for its water balls, similar to, whether it's TPC Twin Cities, PGA National. And so that kind of adds to the mix here where you have, if you're accurate, you can avoid the water, off the tee included. And then you throw in this, penal, unpredictable Bermuda rough, which, kind of produces either flyers where you go over the green or, kind of tumbling shots where, it's a struggle just to get it to the green, and you kind of don't ever know what kind of shot you're going to get from certain lies that you'll see this week. And that's just, one of the unique things about Bermuda grass. And so, I think another angle this week is players who, grew up in the South, who played on this grass their whole life. You got guys like a Matt Fitzpatrick who play well above their baseline on Bermuda grass surfaces. So I think that's another thing to look at. But yeah, like off the tee, you want to stay in the fairway. And then putting is really interesting because when you look at the numbers, this is literally one of the easiest set of greens to putt on the entire tour. And so, whether that, there's, I don't know if anyone's ever done research on, does that make bad putters better or does that level the field more? So it's really interesting to kind of see that, you can putt, be a poor putter coming in and you can still have success here. So, yeah, just a lot, really interesting course. I think there's a lot of risk reward here, obviously with the water in play. Yeah, that's a decent summary, I think.
Yeah, I think we mentioned this kind of thing with LACC where we saw the guys go and shoot a pair of 62s to start the tournament and also have on the same day guys shooting 79s, right? So on a course like this with penalties and things like that, if you have a good day with flawless, error-free golf, you can really go nuclear, but at the same time, there's hazards and disaster lurking everywhere. So I totally agree there. One final little tidbit, I think it is Zoysia. Kikuya or Zoysia?
It's Zoysia fairways, yes.
Yeah.
Zoysia fairways. So not 100% Bermuda, but rough greens Bermuda.
Yeah. So that's just a little interesting variance that you're going to have to deal with on the fairways there. And I think Sepp Straka really kind of enjoyed that last year. So it's a fun little course to see what's going on. And then let's chat about some DFS strategy, Ron. We've got 70 guys in the field this week. We've got a no-cut event. We've got 70 of essentially the best golfers on the PGA Tour, right? That's how you make it into this tournament, is by finishing inside the top 70 on the FedEx Cup. How are you approaching this week? Because I think with the no-cut, with having so many good golfers sub $7,000, your roster construction can really be very aggressive from a stars and scrubs perspective, in my opinion. I know I've been mentioning on my show that I'm going to be playing like a double punt situation where I'm going to be playing two guys sub 6,500 and just really hoping for them to make enough birdies despite their finishing position at the end of the tournament. Just making enough birdies and scoring enough points and letting the 4 other studs at the top were all, very capable of winning the tournament, doing the damage for me. So that's definitely going to be how I build some of my lineups. How about you?
Yeah, I love that strategy. I think with it being a no-cut event, like that just changes the whole dynamic here, because you have, like you said, this small field of 70, and it's not like a WGC event where there's like 10 guys at the bottom that, had to meet certain requirements to play. These are literally the 70 best players on PGA Tour. And so you have these 4 guaranteed rounds. And I think for me, a golfer's ceiling becomes very important this week. So while a player may have a poor round or two, if they have a spike performance in these other couple rounds, I think it can really help boost their position up the leaderboard, which, that's what we want for DraftKings. We want players who are going to outproduce their salary and even their position. And so, I kind of looked at yesterday over the last 100 rounds, players who are gaining either 3, 4, or 5 strokes on approach. And so I think looking at ceiling is important this week. And yeah, I think the cream is going to rise to the top when you have more sample size. So everybody's getting 4 rounds. And so you're going to have the top guys, they're going to have plenty of chances to really go really low here. And so I think, like you said, trying to jam as many players that have win equity as possible into each lineup is key this week. And, when you look at the 6K range, kind of like you said, there are legitimate high upside players down there that you can actually play with confidence this week, thanks to this being a no-cut event. And so whether you want to start with a Scheffler Rahm stack, or if you want to go the route of you're going to fit 4 9K players in, there's tons of viable options this week. But I think the main thing is you just want as many players as you can fit that have that upside and that win equity.
Absolutely. So, yeah, I just clipped it real quick. And if you go, say, for instance, the Sam Ryder, Nick Taylor, $6,000, $6,200 for each of those 2 guys, you can get yourself an average of $94.50 for the other 4 golfers, right? So you can really, really get spendy up top if you just really go super affordable downstairs. And Sam Ryder and Nick Taylor are both, they got upside. We've seen what Sam Ryder could do. So we'll get into those guys towards the end. But that is a definite strategy I think we should adopt this week, especially in bigger GPPs, especially. I think, maybe, as always, in a single entry, 3 entry max, maybe be a bit more conservative, a bit more balanced if you feel that way inclined. But, the bigger the contest, the more risk you need to take on in order to get different. So cool stuff there. So let's join up to the top here. We're going to actually start with just 3 guys, because we have got 5 guys in the 10K range. But let's really discuss Jon Rahm, Scottie Scheffler, and Rory McIlroy. Scottie Scheffler is sitting at $12,100 again in the 12K range, and we don't have a $5,500 range this week. So that's going to make things a little interesting. Rory McIlroy at 11.5 and Jon Rahm at 11.1, a full $1,000 less than Scottie, which right off the bat for me is really appealing. Knowing how good the rest of these guys underneath them are, giving that extra $1,000 is really exciting. So I'm curious as to see what you feel about this range at the top.
Yeah, and it's interesting. If you look at ownership, I'm seeing right now, all 3 of these guys are right around somewhere between 20, 22, 23%. So it's pretty even up top. So I don't think you're going to find many advantages as far as ownership wise. But for me, it all starts with Jon Rahm this week. Like you said, that salary savings is really big. And I think he really comes out motivated and ultra focused this week. The guy hasn't won in 5 months. When I looked at that ceiling, kind of that data, I'm looking at who's gaining, as far as high upside, he's has the highest ceiling by far of anyone this week. He's gained 4+ strokes in 50 of his last 100 rounds. So when you think about that, half of his rounds, he just has this enormous upside. And, when you look at it that way, he actually has twice the ceiling of a golfer like Victor Hovland, who's only $900 cheaper than him. So, he was 5th here last year. So for me, I'm rolling the heaviest with Rambo this week. And I think if we go back up, I think Scheffler's my number 2. And I know some people he's going to be number 1. And, I saw your tweet, about the, new putter he's using. And, he's already talked about how he's more comfortable already and just he likes the feeling of it. And so that remains to be seen. But, like I said at the start, with the greens here being among the easiest on tour for putting, don't know if that's good or bad for his putting woes, but again, with 4 guaranteed rounds, it's not like he was going to miss the cut anyways. But it's just very hard to fade him in this format. He's clearly the best tee to green player in this field by a huge margin. So he's my number 2. And then Rory, I'm still going to include him in lineups, with my favorite core groups, but he will be my biggest fade up top this week. Missed the cut here last year. Bermuda is not his favorite surface, and kind of just like Rom and Scotty, I just like those 2 better. So that's kind of how I would order the top 3.
Yeah, and just to put a bow on the top 3, they are all 3 playing together, and my friend Darbo at Sweet Spot DFS does the target the optimal situation, and he's done the research, and he's figured out that the optimal lineup never comes from the same 2 people in a group to start off the tournament. You always want to kind of have a different guy. You never want to pair the same guys in the same group together, because the optimal never really tends to kick out those guys. And all 3 of these dudes are starting in the same group. Now, you can't put all 3 in the same lineup, but you can put 2 and still get really cheap downstairs. But just to put it out there, I think it might be better to kind of just play each one individually and then kind of go from there. So that's just an interesting little concept that you can run with or don't, but he has done the research, and that is an interesting situation. So next up, to round out the bottom of the 10K range, let's actually go to $9,500. We're kind of going to a weird situation here, but we got Victor Hovland at 10.2, Xander Schauffele at 10,000 flat, Patrick Cantley, and Tyrrell Hatton. Let's just stop there. I think those are 4 really good golfers that we can talk about. And I've got 2 outrights out of those 4 right there on my betting card this week, because I feel like the value's there. And I think the price tag associated with Victor and Cantley are both very affordable, both super solid off the tee. I think that's what you mentioned here. You want to be accurate, because this Bermuda stuff can really make hitting these greens difficult. And both of them are super accurate off the tee. And Victor's obviously got that in. He, I think, has recently been, that last 100 rounds might not be doing justice for Victor, right? I think if you go to his last 50, maybe you'll get a little closer to John Rahm. Maybe not to the exact 4 strokes, but I think that will catch up a little bit. So those are my 2 favorite plays in this range. I think Tyrrell Hatton's going to be very popular. I'm curious as to thinking who you're going to go with this week.
Yeah, you mentioned him. So Tyrrell Hatton is my favorite play here. I'm seeing it right around 17% right now. So for me, in a field like this, I think that's reasonable at the moment. When you really dig deep into his numbers, he's lost strokes tee to green only 1 time in the past year. And you combine that with him being the 5th best putter this week. So just kind of in the midst of the most consistent stretch of his career. He's got 16 top 20s in that stretch, 9 straight top 30s. Again, he's a guy that frustrates people because he doesn't necessarily win, but just his consistency, I think, that he brings to you at this level. And I think, with him being the 7th most expensive golfer, I think he kind of fits that second guy. So if you can, you want to go Scheffler Hatton, Rahm Hatton, I think he's a great second guy to fit in there. For me, I'm kind of, Hovland does fit the profile, of a Will Zalatoris who won last year, just this elite ball striker who can really separate himself by, hitting more greens than other people. And obviously if he does that, you don't have to worry about the short game as much. So that's kind of the angle to look at for that. Cantlay is probably my biggest fade of this group. And the main reason is Bermuda. He's like, I forget the exact number, but well over a half a stroke below his baseline when he plays on Bermuda type courses. So, Schauffele is just kind of always there. I'm going to play him. But for me, my focus, I like a lot of guys below this grouping. And so I'm not going to play a ton of guys here, but Hatton would be my 1 favorite.
Perfect. Yeah. And I think Hatton and Schauffele to me are like cousins, because they both have 3 exceptional rounds of golf in them every single week. And then there's that 1 round that's just not negative strokes gained, but it's not more than 1 or 2, like the one that you need in order to keep that foot on the gas. They kind of get stuck in neutral 1 round a tournament, and it just doesn't let them, Xander in particularly most, just can't quite get there. His T20 rate is the 2nd best in this field, but then his top 10 rate is, way worse than everybody else above him. So it's just a really weird situation. He just can't keep breaking into that top 10. So for me, Xander's out for that reason. If you're going to be spending this much, I need a guy that's going to be inside the top 10 a little bit more. So he's going to be my absolute fade for sure in this range, despite his top 20 rate because also just wanted to mention the ownership situation this week. We have got 70 guys. We mentioned this already. It's going to be a fun week for game theory, Ron, because we've got half the field. Like literally the ownership. Now, yes, the half that's missing is the bunch of 6K guys that are getting 1%, 2%, 3%. But it still means that this ownership has to go elsewhere, right? So we're going to see it spread out nicely. And I think finding a very good pivot here and there where it's sub 5% is going to be difficult, especially if a guy has potential, right? The 5% or less is going to be guys that are going to be struggling and low owned for a reason. So roster construction is going to be very important. You can't just shove a whole bunch of 20% owned guys into your lineups this week. So just wanted to put that out there as well. Let's scoot on down the board here to Ricky Fowler at 9,500, Jordan Spieth 93, Tommy Fleetwood at 91, and Colin Morikawa at a flat 9K to round out the 9,000s. In my opinion, Ricky Fowler is the opposite of Xander. He's just been repping out top 10s in a crazy fashion since his win. He has shown a bit of a regression in form, but that's okay. I think he's had some time to relax now, and I think there's going to be some interesting guys in this range because the top of this board is pretty much all locks for the Ryder Cup. And the moment you start getting south of like $9,500, I think that's where things can get real interesting. These guys are all on the bubble of the Ryder Cup, and I think they have a lot to prove. And Ricky, in particular, having won and played so good golf this year, still not necessarily in the field, in the Ryder Cup squad. So I think another great performance from him this week will really go a long way to establishing his dominance in that team. And, I think he's ball striking as well. I think you can just lean on that iron play all week this week from Ricky. And he's a really, the short game is always immaculate from his side of things. So he's my favorite. I'm out on Jordan Spieth. I have no idea what he's going to be getting up to this week. I know the ownership is a little less, but man, oh man, has he been playing some really atrocious golf. So that's my fade. That's my favorite play. I love Tommy Fleetwood this week as well. I'm not a big fan of Tommy. So if I mention Tommy Fleetwood, I like the course fit for him. And this kind of course where he can just get to -12, I think that suits him perfectly. So Ron, what are your takes on these boys over here?
Completely agree on Ricky Fowler. Personally, I think he is a lock for the Ryder Cup, but that's another discussion. I just think he's just the year he's had, the way he's turned it around. And, like you said, I think maybe we can give him a little bit of relief just going overseas. A lot of times when players go, they play, the Scottish, the Brit, the Open Championship. I'm not going to count that against him as much. But yeah, for me, like he finished 12th in my model this week. He's been the 8th best player in the world when you look kind of over a longer stretch, even 12 months. That includes 9 top 15s over the past 5 months. And, before the Scottish Open, he had gained strokes on approach in 18 of his previous 19 events. So just ultra consistent, ball striking, really streaky with the putter. Much obviously has been made of, the putter switch that he made and how much that has helped him as well. So, and even just if you look across the board, like he's gaining strokes in every category. And, that's what we want to see in an event like this. When we want to limit bogeys, we want guys to stay away from the water. We want accuracy off the tee. He's kind of mixing all that together. And I really love him with his upside at 9,500 this week. My other guy here, and I'm not usually a big Morikawa guy, but I just think when you're looking at the mold, Zalatoris last year, Morikawa, top 3, top 5 elite iron player, so again, we're gaining strokes and approach is paramount with these small greens. I just think his profile fits his course perfectly. The greens are not tricky. These putts are not tough to read. And so, yeah, similar to Zalatoris, Morikawa's gain on approach in 16 of his last 18. Everybody knows how elite he is with the ball striking. And, I think the success he's had here in the past kind of speaks to that as well. Finishes of 5th, 26th, 20th. So I think he's underpriced. I was expecting him to be a little more expensive. Now, what that does to his ownership, I'm only seeing 14% right now. Don't know what you have him at, but that's really exciting to me to see him, at that level. So he's my pretty clear number one. And I think, even playing around some lineups, you could go Rahm, Morikawa, and you have I think it's 75, 7,600 left over. So you could really, there's a ton of win equity in those two right there. And when we get to that low 8K range, some people may have different opinions on some of these guys, but I think you can really get a ton of win equity packed in if you start with those two guys.
Oh yeah, we've got multiple major champions in this 8K range, right? So like it's stacked with talent. So there's definitely people that you can play in your lineups there. And fact or fiction, Ron, Colin Morikawa's gained strokes putting in 4 of his last 5 starts.
That is true.
That is true. Wouldn't you believe that? I think that's one of the craziest situations I've ever seen, and it's very exciting, right? If he can have fixed that putter, and 4 out of 5 it's a decent trend, right? And the fifth, the one that he didn't gain, was at the Open on the fescue grass over there. So coming back to the US soil, he's gained on his last 4, which is very appealing to me, and I definitely agree. I think he's definitely going to be in my player pool, and you can't argue against that accuracy off the tee and the elite iron player that he is. So we'll see what he can get up to. Jason Day finally showed up just after doing absolutely nothing for a very long period of time after winning the Byron Nelson. He goes and feels cute and finishes T2 at the Open Championship, just out of nowhere. So he's $8,900. Max Homer's been playing some great golf at $8,800. Matt Patrick at 86. Tony Finau I just skipped over at 87. Hideki at 84. Brian Harmon, the Open champion, at 83. Cameron Young, 82. Sam Burns, 81. And Sungjae Im, a casual, $8,000. So we got all of these guys in here. I also skipped over Wyndham Clark, the Open champion, at $8,500. So lots of great golfers. Matt Fitzpatrick being the past US Open champion. So everybody in this range just stacked and loaded and ready to go. So I'll rattle off a few guys I'm really excited for. Cameron Young at $8,200, Ron. He is, when you take a look at good shot percentage, which is where you gain over half a stroke on a single approach shot from a weighted perspective. So you weight these proximities out according to this course. Cameron Young is the number 1 golfer in this field for me. He just absolutely demolishes his wedges. Anything inside of 200 yards, he's a freak. And I'm looking very much forward to him doing his thing. I know you mentioned, you pretty much broke the news to us that he changed his golf ball prior to the John Deere, and we saw a bit of that upside. And we saw that upside again at the Open. Yes, he missed the cut at the 3M, whatever. A lot of people did post-Open, so it is what it is. But he's going to be under 10% owned. I'm in. I think everyone thinks he's a long course specialist. He can use that big driver off the tee. When he's hitting 3 irons off these tee boxes, that doesn't matter, right? Like, he's going to be in the mix, in the middle of the fairway all the time, and just leaning on that iron play. So if that putter can just get better a little bit, then we ride in the mix. But at $8,200, sub 10% ownership in this field, I'm totally okay going to Cameron Young. Also, Hideki Matsuyama. I'll take him on this kind of course. I think anything that's 15 under par or more, it's difficult for me to get to Hideki. But at this kind of a venue, I can do it. All these guys with medium course scoring, I don't mind at all for Hideki. And then Max Homer. He's been playing really good golf lately, not with the irons in particular, but the driver has found itself again, because he was struggling with the driver for a while. And now recently he's been rattling off top 10 finishes like crazy again. And we know what he can do with the putter. At any moment, he can just explode with the putter. So give me all 3 of those guys. I think all 3 of them are sub 10% on my board, sitting around about 9. So even if they get to 10, I'm totally fine with that. That's some really nice leverage for me in this range. I think I'll be rolling with those 3 as my 3 favorites. And then I'll just fade Brian Harmon completely off the fact that he's going to be pushing 20% ownership. Yes, he's the Open champ. Yes, this course suits him really nicely. Yes, the course history is great. Yes, he's accurate off the tee. Yes, he's a good putter. But we've seen Brian Harmon chalk. That chalk from Brian Harmon it leaves a nice little outline on the floor, because everyone's lineups get killed after he misses the cut or has a bad week. So we'll see what happens. He's my absolute fade in the 8K range, Aaron. Talk to me about your favorites and your fade.
Okay, so first of all, I'm glad you've come around on Cameron Young. I know you got on me for bringing up the ball switch thing at first, but I knew you'd come around because he's looked really good, and so I'll come back to him in a minute. But yeah, this range is so stacked, like you said. There's a couple players I'm going to fade that I'll get to, but even the ownership is surprising to me. I thought there'd be a few guys who'd be just a little bit higher, but for me, I think Tony Finau coming in under 10% again. I know people are sour on him. I know even at the 3M, he should have performed better, but he has the 7th highest ceiling out of anybody in this field. We all know what he can do. He's going to get 4 rounds. So I think that is kind of a high upside play for me, a guy that I'm going to definitely mix in. Memphis, another guy who, he struggled off the tee recently. But for me, his course history, which is stellar here, he's got 3 top 6 finishes in the last 4 years here. But I think his love for Bermuda grass courses cannot be ignored here. If you look back to 2018, he's the 5th best player in this field. I'm sorry, in the world, which basically is this field. He's gaining an average of 1.36 strokes per round on courses with Bermuda rough and Bermuda greens. So that's 0.72 strokes above his non-Bermuda baseline. And if you look at his last 5 starts on Bermuda courses, he's got 5 straight top 15s. And so, I think, for some players, that's a real thing. Grass type, he's just comfortable. Even if you look at some of the courses overseas, when he was mostly playing, DP World Tour stuff, great success there as well. So I think Fitzpatrick in this kind of middle 8,600, I think people are going to overlook him some. Like you said, major champion, kind of tends to raise his stakes when the fields get a little stronger as well. So I really like him this week. Dropping down, I think when you get to this 8,200, Cameron Young, Sam Burns, Sungjae M, like those 3 guys, I could see them kind of in their own little core group here for me. So Sungjae again, actually, I'll go with Cam Young. Just really quick, looking at the ceiling, he's 10th for highest ceiling. So I think he's a guy who, like you said, he's one of those who will have a really bad round, but when he gets going, if he even gives you 2 great rounds here, that's what you're looking for at this price. And so Sam Burns is another one. I think Sam is really going to be in his comfort zone this week, playing in the heat in the deep south on Bermuda grass, the same conditions he grew up in. We know he lives in Louisiana, only a few hours away. It's on a course he's thrived on. He's got finishes of 2nd, 20th of the last 2 years. Finished 14th in the Wyndham last week, gaining almost 5 strokes on approach. And again, when we're talking Ryder Cup, he's kind of the biggest one to me as far as really trying to make an impression here. And going into next week for the Ryder Cup team. And so just think he has the skill set. We all know how streaky he can be putting, especially on Bermuda greens. So really love him. And then Sungjae, I know people are up and down on him as well. He's kind of underperformed recently, but he does his best on Bermuda as well. And so, I just think with him playing last week, getting into maybe a little bit of a groove, I can see him, made 7% ownership. That's what I'm seeing right now. Like, he might be one of those guys who, if he can go off here, if he can finish top 10, he's one of those guys who can make the difference for you. So really just love that little core right there of Young, Burns, and M. And as far as fades for me, like Max Homa, he's already come around this year on we talk about majors. He struggled, a little bit better in this year than past years. And so his course history here is just flat out terrible. I don't expect him to play that poorly this week, but I don't expect him to finish top 10 either. So for me, with all those players below him, he's a fade. I think Wyndham Clark is kind of maybe slightly coming back to earth a little bit. And of course, like you said, Brian Harman, when I've got Young and Burns and him below him, that's just an automatic fade for me.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll just push back a little bit on Sam Burns because I just don't trust his ball striking, right? Although, like when there's a guy that's trending like he is on ownership, I'll tend to find a reason to fade someone, unless there's a reason not to, then I won't. But outside of last week, if I know it's 1 week and it could all of a sudden like Billy Horschel, where he just had one good week and then everyone pounced on him. And then it happens and you sit there, you're feeling like an idiot because you didn't react to 4 rounds of golf, so I get it. But when there's ownership at stake and Sam Burns is kind of pushing because of that price tag at $8,100, I'm going to be maybe leaving him alone just because I just don't trust his ball striking right now, although he is one of the best putters in the field. So
do you like Sungjae more than him?
From an ownership perspective, absolutely. And I wouldn't say that Sungjae's that. I think Burns' upside's definitely much better. Like he can win the tournament, where I don't think Sungjae's got to play like 300 events to win one. But Burns, he can absolutely just rattle off a win at any moment. But at this kind of ownership, I'm hoping for like an outsider top 30 finish for him. So, but even at 81, that's potentially still okay. Yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting situation. I'm playing the leverage game down here. We'll see what happens. But moving on into the sevens, let's talk about these guys who go to the first half of it, because we don't really have too many people left to discuss. Tom Kim, Russell Hanley, Sepp Straka, Keegan Bradley, Corey Connors, Sahith Theegala, Denny, who knows what's happened to McCarthy, and Benny On, who's been playing some really great golf lately. So those are some guys we want to mention here in the top of the sevens. I think, there's some really good golfers in this range still. Keegan Bradley's won twice on the PGA Tour this year. He's also on that Ryder Cup bubble. I've got him for an outright at 90-1. Take a look at what he can get up to off the tee, on these shorter golf courses inside the top 20, on courses shorter than 7,200 yards over the last 50 rounds. So he's inside that box there. You can get really good with the irons, particularly from 125 to 150. He leads the PGA Tour in proximity this year. So, that's what happened at the Travelers, that kind of a golf course, a lot of those wedges in your hand. Keegan Bradley's very dynamite with those situations. So I love what he can get up to. And if you look at his last 24 rounds of golf, his best stat is his putting by a long way. What is going on in the world right now? Are we getting taken over by aliens or something? But Keegan Bradley's inside the top 10 in putting, and that's a surprise to me, but also not, because he's been playing great golf. So I like him. Sepp Straka, course history, obviously almost won the damn thing and has been playing some solid golf lately too. Some nice ownership there. So hit the Theegala, Ron. I'm really curious as to what's gone on with him, because remember we were talking about how bad his off the tee numbers have been. Last 3 starts, gained off the tee in all 3. Guess what went? The approach play. Out of nowhere, the moment he starts gaining off the tee, all of a sudden his approach play starts acting like his driver. And isn't that just hashtag golf? So if we can find Sahith Theegala at 5% owned, who, by the way, people, is 31st in birdie or better rate for $7,600 golf, that's 5%. I don't mind him at all. You give me 4 rounds of Sahith Theegala, one of them is going to be an absolute dynamite round. So if that driver's better, I'm willing to take a chance that he's a really good wedge player as well. He's, in fact, one of the best. So I love what he can get up to with the wedges. In that range, I'm out on Denny McCarthy. I think he's my fade in this range for sure. I just think his entire game is he's just lost his swing essentially. So at a course like this, I don't want anything to do with that. And then Benny On has been playing really good golf. Man, oh man, has he been playing good golf, especially after switching to that broomstick. So if you're looking to win a tournament, just grab a broomstick and then start sweeping, baby. So see what's going on there. But who's your favorites in these ranges? I know I didn't mention Tom Kim or Russell Hanley, 2 very popular guys at the top there, but I'm not too concerned about Tom with his injury though. A little worried about that ankle.
Yeah, I'll pick up there. Those are my 2 guys in this range. I think Henley is just really underpriced. To see him below some of these other guys, 9th in my final model. He's got 8 top 20s in his last 11 starts. He's an approach gaining machine, exactly what you want on these tiny greens. Allow him to get some separation on the field. He's from Georgia. He's so used to these Bermuda type surfaces. So I really love Henley at this kind of 7,800 price. And then, Tom Kim, when you look at ceiling, he's the 23rd highest salary, but he has the 9th highest ceiling. And so I think his upside for me, I am a little surprised his ownership is not a little bit lower. I thought maybe a few more people would shy away from him with the fact, this is a no-cut event. You need those 4 rounds. And, but just listening to his interview on the broadcast on Sunday, he sounded pretty confident. And just the fact that he finished second after he injured the ankle, kind of showed me it's not too bad. And so, so I think he should be fine. And these other guys below, very interesting range here with Bradley, Straka, even Corey Connors. For me though, I'm going to go back to Denny here, and I know his last 2 weeks have been awful. And we think of him as, even when he was playing well, we think of him as having this really high floor, and he's just a safe play. He's got this great short game. But he has the 13th highest upside in this field. He's had some really, really big spike rounds over the last, 6, 12 months. He's really become a very solid to good approach player. And so, I think as we get closer to the line of lock time, I see him at 9% right now. I think that's probably going to drop as the night goes on. And so I'm willing to go back there because I do think, if he can snap out of this little funk he's in, and again, he's got 4 rounds to do it. So I'm willing to take that chance with him, and that's mostly because I don't love a lot of these other guys in this range. I know Ben-On has been really good. I don't know. There's just something about, Ben-On. Siwoo Kim is so inconsistent at times too, though he does have the upside, who's right below him. So for me, I'm going to maybe get some leverage by taking Denny at 7,500.
Yeah, no, that's fair. It's only been 2 tournaments of golf. So here I was preaching that I don't want to overreact to 4 rounds, but I'm overreacting to 8. So, where do you draw the line at the end of the day? So a little quick, interesting tidbit on Russell Henley, who is pushing a casual 16% on my sheet here. If you filter on top 20 rate, inside the top 10 in this field, amazing stuff. If you filter on top 10 rate, he's outside the top 40. So that's something you got to mention. And then if you take a look at what his birdie or better rate is, which is, very, impactful to your DFS scoring, he's 62nd in the field in birdie or better rates, So I saw those 2 stats and those 2 metrics, and it's kind of concerning to me, especially the birdie rates. I know he dominated at the Wyndham, but that's his golf course, right? So I don't know how he does in these bigger tournaments. I know he has popped at a few majors and things like that, but one of those top 10s was at Augusta. So it's an interesting situation, but I don't know about that upside for me from Russell. But I don't mind Denny as a little pivot. Actually, now that you've mentioned it, I think you could see a little bit of a bounce back this week. $7,400, boys and girls. We got $7,400 Siwoo Kim. Lucas Glover, after winning the Wyndham Championship last week, is 18% at $7,400. JT Poston at 14% ownership, $7,300. Then we got Steven Yeager, Justin Rose, Cameron Davis, Emiliano Grillo, Keith Mitchell, Harris English, Taylor Moore, and Aaron Rai. Aaron Rai has been my nemesis ever since he's shown up on the PGA Tour, basically. I just cannot get this guy right. He was in my 5 for 6 lineup that finished 5th out of 2,000 people. Aaron Rai missed the cut. If I just have him make the cut and score 17 points for the weekend, I win the damn single entry lineup. Make myself $1,000 instead of $225. So Aaron Rai owes me $750 at least. I'm going back to him at this kind of golf course, $7,000 flat. The ball striking has been solid from a large sample. I need him to bounce back this week. The accuracy off the tee, 3rd in the field in accuracy, I think that's paramount at a venue like this. It just really gets the dominoes falling in the right way, right? The moment you're in the fairway, the rest of the golf course becomes that much easier. If you're in the rough, you're scrambling and you're fighting and you're really swimming upstream against this course. So I like what he can get up to off the tee. And something I've mentioned this week is there's guys that played last week at the Sedgefield Country Club at the Wyndham, which I think is a very similar course. Don't you think? It's kind of a little less penalties involved, but the setup is the same, accuracy, wedges, mid-irons, that kind of stuff. If you liked someone last week that's playing this week, play them again, because the chances are that they play well after a bad week last week is pretty good if you had them pegged to play well at the Sedgefield Country Club. So that's someone I'm kind of going to. Emiliano Grillo grades out really well for me for $7,100. He might be one guy I eat the chalk on down at the $7,100 range. He's putting also. He has Emiliano Grillo over the last 24 rounds. His best stat of the 4 is putting. Surprise, surprise. Keegan Bradley and Emiliano Grillo living in a world of their own right now. So that's just really exciting for me. And we know how good of an iron player he can be too. I'll be going back to Justin Rose. I love myself some Rose pain. Just stab me another thorn in the side there. I think Justin Rose is totally fun doing that. I know he's been hit and miss, but we've seen, if you're talking about upside, Ron, we've seen what this guy can do. He's had weeks where he's had career worst putting performances. In the same week, he's had a career best approach week. This is what happens with Justin. If it all just comes together, we can get a guy that's $7,200 that can win this tournament. So he's accurate off the tee. The distance that he doesn't have isn't that big of a problem here. There's only 2 par 5s, which I really like about Max Homer this week too. The par 5 scoring for him not that good, but there's only 2 of them. So we'll see what happens there. I'm a big fan of these guys in this range here, and I think What do you think Siwoo can get up to? You think he can finally find the putter? Like the ball striking has been fantastic, but the putting has it's been very bad, like very, very bad. So do you think he kind of just rectifies that a bit, or is that going to continue?
I mean, he's definitely one of those boomer bust plays for this week. Yeah. I mean, it seems like everybody who's taken the broomstick is having success, and now he's gone through a little downturn here. So yeah, really interesting to see, especially with him at like 6-7% ownership, because we all know he has the ability to win this tournament. So he's definitely interesting. For me, like you kind of stole my thunder a little bit on Grillo. Like when you really look at it, like everybody knows he's always great on approach, but how in the world is he now a top 5 putter where he ranks over the last 5 months? And so it's just an amazing turnaround for him. And so I think he's a great play, and I think that's kind of showing with ownership kind of creeping up towards 14%. So a lot of people are kind of catching on to that. For me, yeah, there's some guys I'm going to really spread in here. I think Steven Yeager has really turned a corner. I know this is a no-cut event, but he hasn't missed a cut in 5 months, which kind of speaks to the consistent level his game has risen to. He's got 8 top 30s in that stretch. He fixed his putting issues that he was going through. He's gained ball striking in 14 of his last 16. So just really amazing from him, sitting right there at a very reasonable 7,300. For me, I'm out on Rose. And when I look at I agree with the upside completely. He's got 3 missed cuts, though, in a row. And the big thing for me to turn me off of him is he is really bad on Bermuda. Like, as great of a putter as he is on bent grass, like his putting average just falls off the board on Bermuda greens. And so that's reason enough for me to get off of him. I love Keith Mitchell down here. I mean, Keith Mitchell, at this range, he's clearly the lowest guy, 4.5% I'm seeing right now. He's a guy who, we all think, and I've been waiting personally for him to kind of, rise to the top and win an event here. It hasn't happened. He's struggled actually more than he's had success, but I just think when we're getting down here, as good as he is off the tee, he's a guy who can really pop and get hot with the putter. He loves Bermuda. So for me, I think he's a good play down here. Probably my favorite play, though, is going to be Harris English. And there's an interesting quote he made here a couple years ago. He said, "This is one of my favorite courses on tour. I feel like this is the most underrated course we play all year. I'm very familiar with the grass out here, the Bermuda, the Zoysia fairways. It's just one of those courses that suits my eye." And then he goes on to say, "I love these small greens. They don't have a lot of humps and bumps in them. They're very flat, and I feel like I can make a lot of putts out here." And so, he's clearly confident. He's kind of had his struggles, and he's kind of rebounded again. And so I think at 7K flat, I know his approach and ball striking numbers have kind of been up and down. But I think his upside is there at this range. And yeah, I agree with you on Aaron Rai. For me last week, it was Rai, Smalley, and McCarthy that just killed me. If those 3 would have just made the cut last week. And so, but yeah, like you said, like Rai is the perfect picture of what you want on this course. He's going to hit fairways. He's one of the more underrated approach players in the world. Like, he's really consistent. It's just, the flat stick. And again, maybe these greens, as kind of as easy as they are, maybe that will help a guy like him. So I think, he's definitely worth going right back to at 7K.
Absolutely. Yeah. And just to tie a little bow on Harris English there, I think he is the lowest owned golfer in the 7K range, which is the lowest golfer in the range that we've spoken about so far before we dive into the sixes. So since I last updated my ownership projections, but let's take a look at the sixes. Yeah, we got a $6,900 Eric Cole who's pushing 10%, which is very, very much warranted, after his very solid performance for the price that he's being put out there for. He has got a bit of the Sunday scaries lately, though. Every time you take a look at what he gets up to on a Sunday, just not quite there. Adam Hadwin, Thomas Dietrich, also the Catfish City over there for Thomas Dietrich. Brendan Todd, been playing some great golf at $6,800. Chris Kirk, Alex Smalley, John's favorite over there at $68. And Adam Svensson, also playing some solid golf last week. Vincent Norman, the winner of one of those alternate events, and Bo Hassler sitting at $6,700 with Matt Kuchar, who I didn't realize I think has made every single appearance in the playoffs. I thought Adam Scott was the only person to do that, but turns out Matt Kuchar is kind of flying under the radar and off he goes. So I don't mind Kuchar at a course like this at all. And then it kind of rounds out with some really chalky guys, Lee Hodges and Andrew Putnam. We can talk about them at $6,500 and $6,400. I think either of them are going to be very, very popular in this range, very much warranted. Andrew Putnam's got phenomenal course history at this venue, and it makes a lot of sense. The accuracy off the tee is a great putter, pretty solid with the short irons, all that kind of jazz. I don't know if I can really roster a guy that's going to be 10% owned at $6,400 though, especially with the course history there though. I might just have to leave him alone. I'll play him in like Rainmakers or something like that. Lee Hodges wins the tournament. He becomes $6,500 and 10% owned, which, also got solid course history at this venue. Two very important situations, but like you mentioned, in the lower ranges, you typically want to focus on course history. But if it's going to be raising ownership numbers through the roof, this is the range that you really separate yourself in, Ron, right? Like if you're looking in a big GPP, you're looking for guys that are sub 3%, like a Davis Thompson from the Amex when you took down a casual, whatever, $100,000 or whatever you won there. But, 2% owned in your lineup. That's all you need, is for that guy to finish second. And that's what you're kind of looking for. Lee Hodges and Andrew Putnam finishing second isn't going to really make or break your lineup in a big GPP. So put them in, but don't think that they're going to be your getting different situation yet. Some other guys I want to mention is Adam Schenk. If you're looking from a boom or bust situation over 4 rounds of golf, Adam Schenk just shows up in the most random times. He's had 2 really good weeks, then he has 2 bad weeks. He's had now 2 bad weeks. I was on him in 32% of my lineups last week, and he managed to make the cut, but finished T64th. So that didn't quite help. But he does have some solid upside. The irons have been really good over a large sample size. And, we know he can get hot with the putters. So I really like him. If there is chalk I will eat in this range, it's Brendan Todd. He's just been playing really good golf, played great golf last week. And, if you liked the guy last week, this is the week again. So I'll go back to him at $6,800 for one of the few guys that I like in this range, in the top of the 6s, Ron. So I don't know. Were you kind of leaning towards in the 6s? Are you really going to be dealing with these guys? I know we mentioned that this is the range we want to go to, but I think I might be skipping over the majority of this range and kind of going even deeper once we get into the next 65 and subs.
Yeah, for me, this is kind of entering mix and match territory. Typically in this range, I'll pick, maybe 3 to 5 guys and just maybe go 5 to 10%. But I think for me, when you look at ownership, I think there are some guys you can really play who are, you talk about under 5%. So like a Thomas Dietrich, who, everybody knows he's another guy who just struggles to finish tournaments. He kind of is really good Thursday through Saturday. Sunday comes, he falls off. He's kind of obviously not been in contention, but he's kind of fixed that ship a little bit. I think the more he plays, the more experience he gets. And I just think he's one of the most skilled golfer in this range, as far as when you look at just his overall ball striking, his pedigree. He's played all over the world. He's had success in many different places, and he's still a young guy. And so I think when you're looking at 5% for Dietrich, you give him 4 rounds. I think he can be dangerous here. I think a Chris Kirk, 3%. I know I played him a lot last week. He was another guy who, if he would have just made that cut, that he surprised a lot of people. I think, you can really take advantage of that 3% ownership, because Chris Kirk usually doesn't play poorly back-to-back in 2 weeks in a row. And so I think Kirk is really good on Bermuda, is a great play here as well. And yeah, there's a lot of options here. I think Eric Cole, Alex Smalley both have a lot of upside. Adam Svensson has win equity. And there's some clear guys who I'm not touching. Like, I'm not touching Taylor Moore. I know he's 7K, he's right above here, but he's way too dependent on the putter. Adam Hadman really struggles on Bermuda greens, Bermuda courses, not playing him. I think Vincent Norman is a guy who, when we talk about only 2 par 5s, he eats the par 5s up. I think he may struggle just a little bit more, dealing with some of these tougher par 4 holes. Bo Hostler's been terrible, not touching him. Mark Hubbard has really taken a downturn with his consistency, and he just does not bring the upside, especially when he's in the upper part of the 6K range. So those are all guys that I'm not touching. And so yeah, if we're looking at 69 to 66 here, even if we'll go 65, Lee Hodges is a guy I'm going to play for sure. Obviously everybody saw him dominating the field at the 3M, and he is kind of right at 10% right now. But I think I mean, I was on him even before the 3M, for DFS. And I just think here, he's from Alabama, another guy who's, used to Bermuda, very streaky iron player. So for me, I'm coming right back to him. And he's maybe the one guy down here I'm willing to eat some chalk on.
Yeah, and that's the thing. You just got to pick and choose your battles. If you're going to eat some chalk on Liages, you got to make sure that you play the rest of your lineup accordingly. So, yeah, there's a lot to like there. Let's chat about some guys that are, beneath Andrew Putnam in the $6,300 range. I love Tom Hoagie, Ron. Like we've always mentioned, if you play Tom Hoagie when he's low owned, when he's cheap, and he's $6,300, he can easily. Would you be surprised? Fact or fiction? You fast forward 5 days in advance, and Tom Hoagie leads the field in approach. Like, that wouldn't be shocking.
No, absolutely not.
Right. So he's $6,300, 4%. Like that can be the thing. And if you take a look at his putting, that's been what his issue has been the last little while. And he seems to have rectified that to some degree. Not entirely. It's always going to be iffy with him, but it's not terrible like it used to be. So it's much better now. Nick Taylor as well. Like he can just rattle off birdies like crazy, and he's $6,200. I really, really like him. He's 22nd in the field in birdie or better rates. So sign me up for Nick Taylor and Brandon Wu's 24th in birdie or better rates. So I'm looking for guys that have got lots of birdies in their tank, and guys like that are going to be Ben Griffin, Sam Ryder, Brandon Wu, Nick Taylor, and Tom Hoagie. They're all $6,300 and cheaper. You can put two of those in your lineups and just run with the Wolves at the top of the pack there. So love what they're up to. And then a random dude as well that I always have to mention is Seamus Power, who's now $6,300. And he has got a 33% top 20 rate this year. And he's $6,300, right? So he's got 0 top 10s, but a lot of top 20s. And for this price, I'm fine with that. He makes a lot of birdies too. Short positional golf course, Seamus Power, sign me up, baby. So I'm going to be playing him a bit this week as well. Are there any other guys that you're kind of leaning on in this range?
All right, so Kurt Kitayama has been absolutely terrible. Obviously, there's some guys in here that you're wondering, how did this guy, like a Taylor Montgomery, how did this guy even make this field? Well, a lot of guys did their damage a little bit earlier in the year because they take, the whole season into account. And so, yeah, we've seen Kurt Kitayama. Right?
You think that's fair?
Very fair.
Yeah,
I think it's fair. I think it's going to be a little maybe better next year when the season's, just from January to, here in August. So maybe a little tighter window, which makes a little more sense. But yeah, just with Kitayama, he's way down here, yet he has the 19th highest ceiling. We saw him win on a Bermuda course at Bay Hill. So he has that ability to pop. And so again, we're talking 4 rounds, 3% ownership, 6,400. I think he's a guy who is a really good play. I agree with you on Hoagie. Will not surprise me if Hoagie finishes top 10 here. Like he has that potential. Yeah. And again, he has the iron play on these really tiny greens to separate from the field, making more greens than other people. Doesn't have to worry about the short game as much, which is really bad. So he's interesting. Putnam, if you're looking for maybe a little more consistency down here, maybe not as much upside. Again, you may not want to deal with the 11% ownership, though, so that's something to consider. I guess for me, there's 2 guys here at the very bottom, near the bottom, like Ben Griffin, who you brought up. So he missed the cut at the Wyndham last week. Okay, he's from North Carolina, very familiar with this setting, Bermuda greens, Bermuda rough. So if you look back before last week's miscut at his previous 7 events on Bermuda courses, he's got finishes of 14th, 21st, 12th, 29th, 16th, 24th, and 4th. So he basically has 7 straight top 30s on Bermuda base courses. And so just, I think he's a guy who, people are going to remember, oh, he missed the cut last week. He's the last guy in, he's sitting there at 6,100. I mean, this kid is talented. This kid is streaky. He can really get hot with the putter. He can get hot with his ball striking. And, he's been up and down recently, but I just think, he got back onto Bermuda last week. It didn't play horrible. I guess he's another guy who I expected to make the cut. But I just think at 6,100, like he's, in my opinion, I would play him if he was 7K flat. So to play him at that amount. And then Sam Ryder, I think when you look at a guy who, very bottom of the basement here, 6K flat, he finished 38th last week. He was 7th the week before at the 3M. In those 2 weeks, He's gained 13.6 strokes ball striking in his last 2 weeks. I mean, we're talking about a guy at the very bottom here. Bermuda's his favorite surface. He's a guy who's mostly known for being a great putter. And so you combine that. I mean, if he combines that ball striking this week with the flat stick, like, again, you could really stack 4 or 5 guys up top with him. Yeah. And so there's a lot of flexibility there if you even play him in a few lineups. So those would be Griffin and Ryder, my 2 guys down here.
Yeah, I will probably have at least 10% Sam Ryder, 10 to 15%. Like, I just feel like that price. And, you know, this guy holds out. Like, he holds out for eagles. His DFS scoring is one of the highest, you know, relative to his skill level. So he just does this weird stuff where he just does weird stuff. So let's find a cutoffs point here. Let's do 70. How about we do someone that you want to, that you definitely, your favorite flag plant above 7,000 and your favorite sub $7,000 golfer, Ron, to end the show.
Yeah, I'll go with Morikawa here. I just think he's a guy who could easily be priced higher than a Spieth for sure. You know, so I think at 9K flat, very reasonable ownership. Course history, approach play, like you talked about, improving with the putter. Hopefully that continues to get better this week. He would be my guy up in this range. And then if we're going 7K and below, yeah, I'll be consistent here. I'll go Ben Griffin. I think the roster affordability, he can be fitting other guys, and I think that's big this week. So yeah, Griffin.
Yeah. No, I love that. 6,100. Ben Griffin and Sam Ryder are going to definitely find themselves in a lot of my lineups. I'll say Sam Ryder as my guy that I like in the bottom of the basement there, sub 7. And, you know, the more I've spoken about Patrick Cantley, the less I really came into this podcast really excited about him. And now I'm like a little concerned, but he kind of just gets it done. You know, somehow he just gets it done. I'm not too concerned. I think the off the tee numbers for him are just too good. So I'm going to be playing him at $9,800 a lot. So we'll see what he can get up to. Those are my 2 guys. I'm flag planting. And yeah, that's the slate for us on the BetSpurt show today. Ron, talk to the people. What's going on in your life for the rest of the day?
We've got some DraftKings ownership coming out here in the next hour or 2. Not sure if we're doing office hours again, but if you're a Discord member, yeah, me and Ryan Noonan, Andy Molitor will be in there answering any DFS questions you may have. And yeah, we'll the weather. I think the weather looks like we'll get some rain tomorrow in the morning. So maybe if you're playing Showdown tomorrow, guys who are teeing off right after those conditions, you know, we got really soft. I think that'll be beneficial. Doesn't look like wind will be too much of an issue. It looks like it spikes a few different times, but it's really inconsistent if you look across. You know, I look at windy.com. I look at, obviously, Wind Finder. So not really seeing any huge advantages weather-wise, but yeah, we'll look at some first-round leader stuff. And all that stuff's posted on the Discord if you are a member at BetSpurt Golf.
Awesome stuff. Thank you, Ron. Yeah, if you want to follow any of my stuff, at the Model Maniac is my Twitter account. It's got all my rotoballer.com information out there for y'all. Let's have a week. You know, we're due for a big one. I think it's going to be a fun one. The Byron show's in the mix, and we're going to have a great week. We'll catch you guys for the second leg of the playoffs next week, folks. Thank you.